Hi, and welcome to our class on how to become a great technical trainer. My name is Kathy Vick. I'm a senior consultant with Pragmatic Works. I focus on both SQL and BI technologies, primarily within the Microsoft stack. I have a long career working with SQL Server, starting way back in about 1990 when it was still Sybase, and then moving to Microsoft in 94. I've done 2 tours of duty with Microsoft, including 5 years of Microsoft consulting services. I left Microsoft to join Pragmatic Works about 4 years ago because I really enjoy the type of work I can do with Pragmatic Works, including building training like this. My contact information is on this slide. Feel free to pause the presentation and copy it down if you need it. Just one quick thing about me, as the slide says, my passion outside of work is travel and photography. So I thought I'd share this picture from a trip to Iceland last year. It's one of my favorite images of me because I had to climb a barbed wire fence in order to get this shot with the horses. Iceland horses are smaller than American horses, but while they look smaller, they're still pretty huge when you're actually standing next to them. Okay, so that's enough about me. Let's talk about who should be attending this class. I believe this class can benefit consultants and current trainers working on sharing their expertise in technical seminars, classes, and presentations. This could include people wanting to speak at some of the many community events, or even someone trying to get a job in technical training. I also think it's a good class for anyone getting ready to hire someone to do technical training, because this will help you know what to look for in good quality technical training. Trainers often struggle with customers who aren't prepared for the types of issues that can come up in technical training. So hopefully this will identify some of the things you can do as a customer to get the most out of your training sessions. Let's talk a little bit about what you're going to learn in this class. My goal for you is to learn some techniques and tips on how to do better technical training by the end of this presentation. I will give you some of my thoughts as to why technical training is so challenging and what the important things are to make your training and presentations a success. We'll talk about some specific skills you need for good technical training, which are also good skills to have for any type of presentations. We'll discuss the challenges in developing good training materials, and I'll give you some suggestions on how to use these tips. And before I get started, I really want to point out something important. Everything I teach you in this class is a guideline, not a rule. Please keep that in mind as we go through this together. You will at some point probably violate almost every guideline I give you, and that will be okay. I'm probably going to violate several of my recommendations, but I'll try and point out those violations and tell you why I did them. Keep that in mind as we go through this presentation. These are recommendations to help you get better. But if you need to do something contrary to what I'm recommending, just make sure you know why you're doing it, and I think it'll be okay. It's also okay if you don't agree with my strategy for presentations. I'm sure there are many views on this, but what I'm going to be presenting has worked for me, and I hope it helps you. Let's talk a little bit about what you're not going to learn in this class also. I think it's very important to understand what you're not going to learn today. I'm not going to go into detail on any of the technical subjects. There are far too many of them to focus on in this presentation. As I said on the last slide, there's a lot of general presentation tips that will work no matter what the subject matter is, but we're going to focus on how they impact technical training and discuss some of the specific challenges that technical speakers have when delivering their training. This isn't a session on how to do better presentations. It's a session on how to do better presentations of technical content. I think it's fair to say that while there is a lot of overlap, my focus will be on technical training, not general content. So here's our agenda for today. We're going to start by focusing on why technical training is so challenging, and then we're going to discuss how critical developing training materials is and how it impacts the quality of your presentations and training sessions. And we'll discuss what I hope are some obvious points that maybe aren't so completely obvious. Next, we'll talk about the skills you need to deliver successful training. We'll talk about some feedback our trainers have received, which I think will help you understand why we developed this class. It's fair to say we were motivated to get better at technical training based on feedback from some of our less skilled trainers, and this presentation is a direct result of how we've tried to address this issue in our company. We'll also cover some tips and tricks that many of our consultants have learned and shared, And we'll talk about specific things you can do to give your presentations that wow factor. And we'll end up with a few slides to wrap up and summarize the class. So let's get started. Our first topic is going to be to discuss why technical training is so hard and what the challenges are. As a part of this discussion, we'll also talk about what skills are required for different types of training. Let's talk about some of the biggest issues that presenters face. How to present something that, in its basic, is not always fun and exciting. Don't get me wrong, some of the coolest presentations I've been to were technical ones. For example, I was at Microsoft for the Windows 95 launch, and it was very exciting. But your average technical presentation isn't as big in the news as Windows 95 was, and it's usually a bit of a challenge to keep people awake and interested, even in something as short as an hour-long presentation. And if you've spent any time in the technical industry, you'll probably notice that not everybody has a great personality. Although I can say it's gotten a lot better in the last 10 years, there are still some Sheldon Coopers in our industry that can be very difficult to have as a presenter. And while this is a great source of humor on TV, if you're a student in one of these classes, you have felt time stand still. That's a Big Bang Theory joke, by the way. Go watch the episode where Sheldon has to teach a college class. So what it boils down to is that your ability to deliver a technical presentation and keep the audience engaged and paying attention is what will make you a good presenter, or can have you end up as a one-time wonder. We're going to focus on the skills and techniques to help you keep your audience engaged and involved in your presentation when presenting a technical subject. So let's talk about classroom teaching versus technical training. I wanted to contrast traditional classroom teaching with what we do in this industry, technical training. In a traditional classroom training setting, classes are usually longer. They happen over a longer period of time, usually weeks or months. And students usually take training away from their office, not necessarily during working hours. Students in these type of traditional classes also do homework as a part of the class, and their success is often measured in the validity of that homework. Another big benefit of traditional training is that the teachers are usually available for questions and coaching outside of the classroom environment. With the types of technical training that we're focusing on in this class, our classes are usually much shorter duration. They can be hour-long SQL Saturday presentation, or a short morning webinar, or maybe even a week of on-site training at a customer site. And in many cases, our students are juggling their real-life job with this training and trying to be successful in both. This is a huge challenge when we try and do labs, for example, or we try to deliver a complex topic with students who are multitasking. Another huge challenge we have is that most students won't do homework. They'll do the lab during class time, but between their job and their real life, they don't have time outside of class to do the labs. Juggling their real job and their real life leaves very little time for reinforcing the learning, doing labs or projects outside of class. This can further reduce the time we have to deliver our message successfully. And in most cases, the trainer isn't always available outside of class for coaching or helping with homework. For most of my on-site training, I try to come in an hour early and stay an hour late so that I have open time for students. But I find that even when I do that, the students don't always take advantage of it. And think about if you're doing something like pre-con 2-day training session. You only have 2 days and you just don't have a lot of time outside of that training session to spend with students. The message here is that when we do training, we're trying to teach a technical topic to a wide range of participants in a very short time. This is a challenge when compared to traditional training methods, where you have longer teaching windows, you can give homework, and you can help slower students outside of class. What we want to address in this course are some tips to help deal with these issues when planning your training and presentations. I want to talk for a minute about the many types of technical training. I think in technology, this is one of the biggest challenges for trainers, to be prepared for all these different types of training. The skills required to deliver a successful webinar can be very different than the skills required to deliver a successful session at something like SQL Pass or an industry conference. And the hardest part, you actually have to know it. A technical presentation can be way more challenging than a sales presentation just because of the types of questions that you can be asked. Another challenge in this type of training is this virtual training course. A technical trainer needs to know how to deliver the message and somehow engage the audience even when they can't see the audience. As an example, a webinar where somebody talks for an hour, kind of like this one, can be successful or fail based on the personality of the speaker. So, for example, are you paying attention to me? Do you have me on mute and you're answering emails and taking phone calls? I have no idea what you're doing, so I can't tell how I'm doing. Am I interesting enough to pay attention to? These are the things that I struggle with when I deliver these types of training sessions. How do I know if I'm doing okay? And then you have presenting live. Let's talk about that for a minute. Presenting live is a whole different challenge. When Pragmatic Works delivers virtual training, like this one, we have a staff of interns that can edit our recorded sessions and they can remove any long pauses or coughing or background noises or dogs barking in the background. But if this was presented as a live webinar, there'd be no editing of my pauses. There's nobody to cut out when I say or when my cat starts meowing in the background, which has happened to me multiple times. Each type of technology has its own challenges that you have to overcome in order to deliver your message successfully. By the way, if you look at my list of types of technical training, there's one technology that I left off this list, and I'm hoping you can guess what it is. It's written presentations. This is really aimed at presentations that we do using technology. But don't forget that written presentations, books and blogs, are very common presentation for technology. And I'm not really covering these presentation types today, but some of the things that I tell you certainly would apply to written presentations. Our focus is going to be on the things that you see on the slide right now. So different types of training, as I said a minute ago, different types of training need different skill sets. Let's talk a little bit about what that means. The types of skills required to deliver good training sessions can often depend on the type of training you're delivering. Virtual training can have the least amount of interaction with students, which means you need an excellent presentation to keep them engaged in the training materials. As I deliver this webinar, I need to focus on changing my tone of voice so that I don't lull everybody to sleep as I talk. And if I just read the slides, you guys are going to figure out really fast that I could be replaced with a robot. When you can't see your audience, you can't decide if you're going too fast or too slow, if you're too technical or not technical enough. You have to deliver that training and focus on the tips and techniques to keep people engaged in the presentation. You may or may not get questions, and you may or may not have any interaction with the students. So it's really a challenge to use the right skills and keep everyone involved in the presentation when you can't even see them. On the other hand, if you think about in-person or live training, you get that immediate feedback, but the challenge you have there is keeping everyone on track and on schedule. The distractions of a live audience can easily derail a well-designed presentation as the audience decides they want to go a different direction. It's great to get that feedback and have that conversation with the audience or the students, but you have to be strong enough to keep that train on track and deliver the materials from the class. You have to use your leadership skills to keep everyone moving and keep that training on schedule, but you somehow still have to make each student feel that you're involved in their learning process. The bullet points I have on the slide describe some of the different skills you'll need based on the types of training that are available. When you're deciding whether to give a specific type of training, you should evaluate whether you have the right skills for that type of training. Not everybody is good for every single type of training. Which leads me to what I'm calling a hard message. No matter how skilled you are in your profession, you still may not be a great trainer. My best example is that I know I will never be a good singer. No matter how much I sing in the shower or how loud I sing in the car, and no matter how many songs I've memorized, and even if I took singing lessons, I promise you I will never be a good singer. But I know that, so I don't try to be a good singer. No matter how awesome of a consultant you are or how amazing you are in your technology, you may not have the skills to be a great trainer. What I hope is that you take what I talk about in this presentation to evaluate your skill sets and determine whether you should say no to your boss when he says, "Hey, can you build a class on how to be a better trainer?" That was kind of a joke, but I think it's important that each of you need to decide whether you have the ability to pull off the kind of training session you're asked for. In my opinion, this is one time when failing is not better than trying. So think about this as we go through this class. Does the things that I say scare you, or are you ready to take on the challenge? Hopefully, this class will help you figure out the right answer for you, and you can decide what kinds of training you want to do. Not everybody's going to do a great webinar, but they might be fabulous at on-site training and potentially the reverse. So think about your ability to deliver what you're asked and whether you have the personality and the attitude and the ability to deliver these things successfully.